This is Steve.
And this is Shawn.
Welcome to Acro Media's High Five.
So, Steve, what are we going to talk about?
We're going to be talking about, creating budgets for your development project, actually. I don't think we've really talked about anything businessy like this before.
No, we're flipping roles. I get to be the pretty face,
the questioner,
and you get to be, the technical expert here, or the
I'll do my best to
business-y expert.
Perfect. So, okay, if that's the case, what question do you have for me? Talking budgets.
If I'm gonna go to a vendor, I'm gonna make my project, like you said. How do I come up with a budget? Do I need $5,000, or do I need $1 million? Do I need $100,000?
Well, I like the second one you said best. So typically the highest number is the best. No, but
sorry, you said million?
No. But no, there's really no substance to that. Typically, what we want you to do is, if you're going to be engaging with an agency or a development vendor or freelancer, having a little bit of context into whether or not you formulated a budget or whether or not you understand the type of problem you need fixing helps. Oftentimes when prospects or leads will come in, they have a particular set of problems, or they have the scenario that they're in, but they kind of look at it in a reversed way, right? So they come in with the problem, and then they say, how much will it cost to fix that problem? Sometimes it's not that simple. It's not just like a plumber looking at, the pipe saying.
Also, how much will it cost? And I only have $10,000.
That's another piece of it, right? Like, we've exhausted this budget over here, and then this is all we have left, right? So the idea, or the thing that we would want to have happen, is this internal exercise from their company or their business to actually go through and say, okay, let's look at your set of problems and see what's actually going on. What are those things costing you? How did you create budgets in the first place to tackle these problems, and be able to do a little bit of this homework before you actually make your way to that agency or that development company.
Okay, so fulfillment is like costing me way too much money. Like, I have a big fulfillment team, and it's a big slice of my revenue is going towards that, and I want to reduce that. So what am I doing now?
So what we would generally want to know is, what steps have you taken to try to already fix that problem? Right? Because you don't want to go to an agency and we just suggest the exact same things you've already tried, because now we just look like a bunch of dum-dums. Or now you just feel kind of angry because you're like, I already know that. So
Have you tried working harder?
Have you stayed up later and pushed your staff harder?
I've yelled at them a ton, and it's only gotten so far, really.
The idea would be like, when you say that, it's costing you too much, what are you comparing that to? Are you comparing that to maybe when your company was, smaller? Were you comparing it to maybe a competing company? What are they doing? What have they tried to fix the problem as well?
Yeah, so I talked to some other people in the industry, and they're only running at, about 15% for fulfillment costs, and I'm running closer to 30%. So
then at that point, let's actually quantify what 30% is, and then look at the difference between 15 and 30%. So if you're talking about a, $500,000 cost, and we're saying that that's twice as much as you think you should be spending, we're looking at a $250,000 problem that likely is recurring every year, or every billing cycle that we're talking about, right? So if this is a problem that is going to be a 3-year problem, it's really a $750,000 problem.
Right.
So now I'm not saying that you need to go and you need to share that with your agency. I have a $750,000 problem, because that's not always the comfortable conversation to have.
It doesn't necessarily mean it needs a $750,000 solution.
Exactly, but if you go in and you already have like $10,000 left of whatever marketing or fixing budget, whatever type of budget you want to come up with, you should kind of have a general idea that $10,000 doesn't fix $750,000. And so the question that I will typically ask someone and say the last time you've invested to fix a problem this large, or just if you ever wanted to make $750,000, what did you need to spend to make it?
Right. So say if I want to increase revenue by $750,000, how much would I spend on marketing and promotion or something like that?
Employees, et cetera, cost of goods and all of that. And so, in some cases you might find that, the business is really lean, and they don't, they might even just be really experts in their industry, and maybe their ratio is only 20%. Maybe they only spend $150,000 to make $750,000. Like that, that's a scenario that can happen. Okay, well, that's fair. That seems a little ambitious, but even having that seems realistic. To actually engage in a conversation, knowing this is your problem and this is what you believe your realistic price is going to be.
So that's where theoretically someone would say, no, that's crap. Or not, at least, or whatever, right? But at least I would have somewhere to stand.
Somewhere to start, somewhere to actually look at, right? So then going forward with that idea, you have to take that one step farther and say, okay, so we now understand that you have this much ideal budget to actually fix this problem. This is the way that you fixed problems in the past. Doesn't necessarily mean we're a fit yet. Now it's a matter of looking at, what is realistic to plan for that, right? Because we never want to engage in a project in which you have this big problem and then I'm just like, yep, $150,000, we'll fix it. Well, I don't know that. You don't know that. We're just kind of building off of theoretics.
And yet you took my $150,000.
You know how many times we hear those stories though? You know that, right? We hear, this problem goes to RFP. Agency doesn't actually know what the problem is, doesn't really know what the solution is going to be, says, you nailed it.
I have less website and I need more website.
$150,000, sign here, we will fix X and Y problem, right? Well, that's, honestly what ends up happening is maybe 10, 20% of the time it works, but the other 80% of the time you end up with a faulty solution or it's not actually meeting the needs or didn't really actually fix the problem. So the hope that I would want to get out today is do the exercise of what is your problem? What realistically is that problem costing you? Do some sort of math in which you figure out how much you deem this problem to be, worth the fix, or use some sort of scenario in which something similar to this in which you fixed in the past. Use that as your logic, and then also go one step deeper now and say, now I also have to realize that I'm going to need someone to help me plan and architect how to move forward with it and figure out, well, what is that plan worth? And generally the secret sauce is generally about 10 to 25% I've found. So if you have about $150,000 budget and you're going to engage with an agency, it's going to be so valuable to the agency to say, hey, I don't even want to necessarily engage with you fixing the problem yet. I want to engage in actually figuring out how we're going to fix the problem. And this is the type of money or effort I can throw into it. Or here's the stakeholders that I want involved and here much time and energy they can also bring in to assist in this. If we can actually have that, most of the time we now have a starting point to actually build an offering in which we can consult and say, okay, now that we know this is your problem, we can now build interviews and surveys about identifying that problem in greater detail. We now have about a bit of a budget to make sure we have the right personnel and effort to be able to identifying how we want to plan around that problem. And then we can continue to talk and figure out, okay, now that we've planned to actually have an ideal fix, what does that plan entail? And let's do our best to try to match your budget.
So what happens if we go through the plan and it determines that that's not the problem I thought it was?
I guess that's not that uncommon of a thing. In many cases, you might have thought that you're spending too much on fulfillment, but it actually could have been the actual...
Like maybe I compared against a couple of other industries and it turns out that wasn't a valid comparison.
Sure.
Or we didn't calculate costs the same way and there isn't as much to be saved there maybe.
That a little bit comes down to, the type of research they've done. But I would say that most of the time, it could just be something under the surface one level deeper that they haven't necessarily noticed. I don't mean that to be like an ambiguous answer, but you could say in this same scenario where someone is spending too much on fulfillment, there could be something in their supply chain that's broken that's actually causing the extra cost in one side, if that makes sense. Like maybe their e-commerce site, as an example, is taking in orders, and the way that it goes through, it's a very disjointed process.
I'm taking in lots of orders that I don't have stock for, and that makes my fulfillment process be obnoxious.
Exactly.
Or whatever like that. But it's not my fulfillment process itself.
For sure. So what we would do naturally is we would look at your fulfillment process, and in many cases, like, okay, so you're comparing yourself to these guys over here, and here's where you are. Everything seems to be the same, but you're still it's still double.
Yeah, or a slight quirk. Maybe I do makes slightly custom products and these are stock ones, and that turns out to that small difference is actually
that could be it. It's and then you have all these things in between. Are you shipping within your country? Are you shipping internationally? How does your warehousing work? Is it one master warehouse or are you drop shipping? What are your staff doing? Like is your labels all done manually or is it being automated? Do you have an integrated system from e-commerce all the way down to actual shipping, or is it actual people handing off labels to each other and there's a ton of room for human error? All of these things have to be looked at, and you can't really make any assumptions until you actually know what the problem is, and you have to have a general idea of being I'm going to use the word service integrator to kind of know like what's disjointed and what's actually working efficiently to try to engage and say, okay, this is where I think it's broken, because no agency, that just is like a Drupal or development agency is going to necessarily be an expert of that industry. So you can't just assume, hey, I've worked with 100 companies that have had fulfillment problems. That's
Right.
probably not something I've done.
Doesn't mean I know about boxing up medical supplies or something, which is maybe totally different.
Exactly. Maybe I've only worked with like specific goods, or again too, even as like from an agency perspective, the odds that you've worked with 100 of the exact same problem means that you probably are no longer like a consultant. You probably just have some.
I don't know if I've worked with 5. Of
you know what I mean? Though, if you've dealt with that problem so many times, stop being a consultant and build a product to fix that problem, right? Because you're probably onto something there. So,
Okay, so we'll reverse roles here. What's the too long didn't read?
too long didn't read is don't go to an agency. Say that you have a set of problems and a set budget to fix that problem if it doesn't actually match what you would actually invest to solve that problem. That's the first thing. The second thing would be think about planning. If you're going to build a home, if you're going to do anything like that, you need to go to an architect. You can't just be like, and I would like my house built tomorrow. It's not really a thing. You have to go and you have to plan the rooms. You have to plan really anything. And so in this case, make sure you have budget, time, and energy to give to planning, and actually articulate that to whoever you're going to be working with so they can know how best to use that money.
I can't just start putting up walls and then like figure it out as it goes along.
I don't know, maybe you could. But I don't think you're going to end up with the solution that you wanted.
I'm derailing the too long didn't read.
That's
I'm not
fair.
a professional at this.
Either way, subscribe to our channel. Comment below if you have any comments. If you have any questions about this episode, do so below.
Also, you can follow us on Facebook. You can check out our blog at acromedia.com, and you can follow me on Twitter.